and welcome to opening night of Frozen. This is so exciting. I think this is the best part of any production for me, is that it's the only time I get to stand on the stage. Or whichever set it is, I feel like I'm a part of it. But anyway, I'm Shruti Mukund, the Director of Community Engagement, and I welcome you to the for opening night of Frozen. So typically at the behind the scenes, we have conversation that goes a little beyond what you're going to see on stage. It's either the thought process, or we get to speak to the playwright or the director. And in this case, we're really excited that we have Alan Muraoka, and he will be interviewed by our Associate Artistic Director, Hallie Gordon. Please put your hands together and let's welcome them on stage.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody. Hello.
Hello.
I feel like this is so formal, and it doesn't really
I know.
need to be, you know, this is
Exactly.
I feel like everyone get up on stage, let's sit around a corner. I'm really, really excited to be here with you, Alan. Just to give you a little background on me, I started working here almost 2 years ago. And before then, I spent my significant amount of theater education at Steppenwolf Theater, running their education programs and creating theater for young people. And I sort of haphazardly fell into arts education. I was like, I want to be a director. And that was really my life's goal. And I swear this is going to come around. And so this is why I'm so honored to be here with you, because arts education means a great deal to me, and why I'm still doing theater today. And as you'll learn, it's close to Alan's heart too. I'm going to give you a little. I'm going to do your bio.
You're going to do my
first,
back.
Alan,
Okay, my little background.
It's going to take a while because this man has done a lot. As a director of both television and theater, Alan received the 2021 Emmy Award for producing and co-directing Sesame Street's The Power of We. He also received a 2021 National Association for the Advancement of Color People Award, Image Award nomination for Best Director for this show. He was nominated for 3 Emmy Awards for Sesame Street, Sia's Coming Together, which introduced the first Korean-American Muppet. Correct me if I'm wrong on any of these. He co-directed Sesame Street Family Day, which introduced the first same-sex family to the show. He also has been a seasoned director of Sesame Street since 2021. And you've been on that show since 1998?
That's right. 26 years I've been on the show.
26 years. As in the role of?
As the role of Alan, they stretched, yeah. I own a little store called Hooper's Store on Sesame Street.
So no big deal, just owns Hooper's Store, Sesame Street. You've had critical praise in New York, off-Broadway shows as director. You've been in Broadway shows as actor. You've come to Olney Theater and directed South Pacific here.
That's right, in 2018.
And Once on This Island.
In 2014, yeah.
So a friend of Olney Theater.
Very much.
And also you worked on a new young piece of work for our Vanguard Arts Fund, in which we helped develop new work on a piece called The Gifted Prince.
The Gifted Prince, that's correct.
Yeah, which had shadow puppets, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So director, actor, producer, and doing theater all over regional and New York, not just here in New York, but I mean, I could name, you were at East West Players.
That's correct.
In Los Angeles.
That's where I got my start, that's right.
Okay, anyways, you get it.
Yeah.
This is the guy. So talk a little bit about your early experiences with theater and your joy of it.
Yeah. I was probably like any kid. I started doing shows in elementary school and junior high school. I started out as an actor and doing that, and then moved into both acting and directing by the time I was in high school. I have in our play production class, I wanted to direct. This was in high school. Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf?
I can't believe this.
In high school, and so I actually had to go before the principal, and because of the content of the show, and we had this discussion, and by the end of it, I talked him into letting me do the show with both the subject matter and the language. Because he saw my passion for it. I kept saying things like artistic integrity, and by the end of the conversation, he let me do it. Yeah, so we did a cut down version of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, but
just a light comedy.
it was just a light comedy. Yeah, in my sophomore year in high school. But that's also where I really started to realize that it was my path. Like I had a passion for it, and that it was something that I wanted to possibly pursue. But as an Asian American back in the early 80s, there wasn't a lot of representation or jobs for somebody who looked like me on TV. And so, of course, my parents were terrified that I was not going to make a living at this. And so, but they were very supportive in the idea of me letting me pursue my dreams. So we had a compromise in okay, where was I going to go to college? And we landed on UCLA because UCLA both had a really wonderful theater department, but it also was UCLA. So it had, great medical department, had just lots of other choices if it turned out that that it was not going to work out. I was lucky enough that while I was at UCLA, I was cast in several shows. I got into their musical theater department, and Carol Burnett, who went to UCLA, sponsored a competition every year for anybody who wanted to come in, and you created a 5-minute scene, a musical theater scene, and then they chose 8 finalists to perform in front of celebrity judges and a room full of agents, because it was LA, so very close to the arts community there. And so I made it to the final 3 years. I finally won the last year. My joke was I was the Susan Lucci of the Carol Burnett Awards. Always there, but not winning. But that really started me on my path, and I got my agent in LA out of it. My parents saw sort of that it was possible. They also got to meet Carol Burnett. So we have lots of pictures with Carol, with my grandparents and my parents. And so that was that was a highlight for all of them.
So what is your connection with Disney? Because this is not your first Disney partnership.
No, right.
Yeah.
So as a performer back in 1982, I was going to UCLA, but I auditioned to be a part of this singing dancing group called the Kids of the Kingdom that performed both at Disney World and Disneyland, and I got hired to go to Disney World for the summer. And so I did that, and it was my...
Wait a minute, Disney World for the whole summer?
For the whole summer, yeah.
How old, do you mind if I ask how old you were?
I was 19.
I mean, that's like a dream.
It was great.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was great.
Point that out.
Yeah. I mean, it was great. But that being said, you did 6 shows a day.
Yes.
So 5 days a week.
So there was no fun.
For a 19-year-old to be in the Magic Kingdom was the greatest thing ever. Yeah. So we got to sometimes go on rides before the park opened because they were testing them. I remember we checked in the middle of the night So they were vacuuming Peter Pan, the Peter Pan ride. So I got to sneak back and actually see all of the, with all the lights on and everything exposed. So yeah, it was great. And as a 19-year-old, performing at Disney was a great experience. So, and it started me on my path, with Disney. And then I got to direct, I don't know if you remember this High School Musical that was kind of around probably 10 years ago and a big hit. And so I got to direct that around the country. I got to be in Aladdin on Broadway as Iago 7 years ago. So that was thrilling. And then, and so that leads me here to Frozen.
And you have just a really robust artistic life. It sounds like doing that. You're also on different TV shows. How do you go from that to Hooper on Sesame Street? What is the connection of auditioning for that and wanting to be a part of that?
That's a great question. So while I was at UCLA, I had this wonderful professor named Patricia Harder, and her specialties were Asian theater and children's theater. And so I started doing shows with her. My very first show there was a show that had, it was called Land of the Dragon, and it had puppetry, it had Chinese opera elements to it. And so I sort of got immersed in that world of children's theater. And she taught me so many rules about performing for children. One of them, the first being, is never dumb down anything for kids. They're the most honest audience you have. And so everything has to be real. Every emotion has to be real. So don't overplay something because you think that that's what a kid wants. They want the truth. And so that really, I took that with me. I took that with me all the way to 1998 for my very first audition for Sesame Street. And she gave me all of those little rules. So I walked into the room really prepared for what I was about to encounter. And so, I had 4 auditions for Sesame Street. And
did you have to audition with a Muppet?
That was the last audition. And so there was a character named Telly Monster who, he's not on the show that much anymore, but he was a very a little sort of slightly neurotic, always nervous, kind of John Lovett-y kind of puppet. And so the scenario was I was making him a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And so, and we improv'd. And there's a rule in improv that you never negate. You never say no. It's always yes and. And so we start this improv, and I said, "Hey, Telly, do you want a peanut butter and jelly sandwich?" He should have said yes, but he said no. And so I was like, wait, that's not the rules. In my head, that's not the rules. And so, started sweating, got out of it, finished the improv in the scene. And then I realized afterwards, they did that on purpose. They did that on purpose to see what I would do. Because when you are on a show with puppets and with kids, anything can happen within a take. And so, because kids are kids. So they, and we very much had people come, go off script on the spot. And honestly, that's where some of the most magic moments happen, when you have the honesty of a child, and if you just follow along and go on their journey, it's really wonderful. Last night in the house, one of our characters talks to the audience, and he noticed this little girl in a princess costume, and so she's like, "Oh, hello, Your Majesty," and she said, "I'm not a princess, this is just a costume." And so it was like, oh, and then he had to improv his way out of that. It was just delightful, just delightful. And so it's great that all of my theater training then really helped me get the job on Sesame Street and helped me, and I've been there for 26 years because it's a place that I love and I thrive.
Well, I love, I watched one of your videos with the Muppet Rosie.
Rosita.
Rosita. And Rosita, who I believe is the first Latina
Yes,
Muppet, right? She comes to you and she's really upset and sad and doesn't really know why or how to deal with it.
Right.
And she's experienced something, some community violence. It's never clear what it is. It's just community violence. And I just found it so moving, your relationship with her in that moment and the simplicity in which, how do you explain that to a kid? Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. When I started on the show, it was purely both an educational and an entertainment program. And then because we've been, creating new content for 55 years, you have to take what's given around you and the world around you. And our content kind of shifted. And one of the big things that shifted it was 9/11, because parents and children saw these images on TV, and parents just didn't know how to talk to their kids about this. And so we created content in order for both kids and for parents to have sort of that entree into that conversation, into harder topics. And we've had to do that really ever since. The particular one you're talking about with Rosita was in response to the Uvalde shooting in Texas. And so we felt like we had to sort of, we absolutely had to create content for that. We've created content. The Power of We was due to the Black Lives Matter movement and all the things that were happening. Rosita, Jiyoung, our Korean American Muppet, was created because of the anti-Asian violence that happened during COVID. So there's a lot of backstories about why the content we do. Right now, our whole current season is about child mental health and coping mechanisms to deal with a stressful world, because we're dealing with a lot of things. Kids are dealing with a lot of things that they didn't have to maybe 20 years ago.
Yeah. And I feel that I feel that that's one thing that we forget a lot of times in American society, is this idea of the arts being able to actually help children and young people through difficult times in a community environment, right? Because that's what theater does. It's like we're all here together in person. We're not in our own separate areas experiencing this. It's a live experience. And it's about community, and theater teaches that.
Absolutely. And we also have a great amount of educators and psychologists who help us create this content, so we know that it's appropriate for the age ranges that we're reaching for. And then we also have separate content for parents that is a little bit more detailed on how to then talk to your child about these issues.
And I love, because that goes right back to what you were saying, Alan, about that thing that's in the back of your head, don't dumb it down for kids, right? And the content in which Sesame Street presents itself certainly doesn't. And so I think, I guess it's interesting, how do you feel you've changed as an artist working, working with kids in that capacity, and what have you seen in kids in response to what you've been doing?
I mean, for me, one of the greatest things that I get to do is that there are issues that I don't know how to deal with, and that Sesame teaches me. We have, for the last, I think, 10 years, we had a Muppet with autism on the show. Her name is Julia. And on the very first episode, she and I were paired together. And part of the content was sort of learning how to interact and understand, with a child with autism, how to communicate, and then how to empathize, and and so that was very valuable to me, because I kind of had some tools, but not enough. And that taught me very much how, and we've gotten letters from parents saying, well, thank you for this, because we have an autistic child who lives next door, and my daughter now knows knows what to do in order to invite this child with autism into our house to have a play date. And so, which might not have happened otherwise. And I've had so many parents with children with autism just say thank you for this content. And so it's changed me. It definitely has made me a more empathetic person, and it teaches me things as well. So that's why I've been on the show for 26 years.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I do really find that those connections you make with those students, in my case, when I did work for young people, my focus was high school. And so, our work, the work that we did was pretty progressive. We did an adaptation of The Bluest Eye, and that was an example of the kind of conversation you want to have with a young person at that age that doesn't necessarily have an opportunity to talk about those things in school or with family for whatever reason, but creating this community of peers in which they can experience something together and ask questions, not only of themes or what does it mean to be an actor, but they can ask questions of their peers too in those moments. And I see that, I saw that a lot as an educator, and I see that a lot in the way, the way that you create a room. Mm-hmm. The room that you created for Frozen, which, there are, how many actors are on stage?
20 plus, yeah.
So there's 20 plus actors on stage here, and you have to create a room that is really safe, fun, rigorous, joyful, and they're going to be, and then once you leave, they just have each other. Can you talk a little bit about creating that room?
Absolutely. So for me, when I'm acting, I know when I feel safest. I know when I can explore. I know when I can reach for something and then fail and then still feel okay about that, to learn and then try something else. And so when I direct, I try to create that kind of environment for my cast. And so because I'm an actor, I know their language, I know their fears. The very first rehearsal, I know that everybody is nervous. So we just try to relax the room a little bit. We try to have some, so for this show, our first thing, you always go around the room and you introduce yourselves. And so I was like, okay, introduce yourself and then let us know your favorite Disney movie or Disney show. And so what that did is it absolutely broke the ice, because there was Team Ratatouille and there was Team 101 Dalmatians. It just gets the room, just sort of buzzing. And so, yeah, that is, and so especially with kids in the room as well, you have to make sure that there's a lot of play. Yeah. But it's hard because the kids aren't as necessarily well trained, or they're not mature yet, so their skills still need a little help. And so it's, but you have to do it with kindness so they don't ever feel like like they're doing something wrong, because they're not doing something wrong. They just have to learn new skills. Yeah. So our youngest cast member now knows what it means to cheat front, because so like most conversation, I would be like, hey, Hallie, how you doing? So, and then I said, you know, if your mom was sitting over there, she'd be really mad at me because she couldn't see you. So you have to cheat out in order to do that. And she's like, oh, okay, you know. And it took a few times for her to understand that, but she finally got it.
Yeah. What do you think it is about Frozen? And I ask this from a place of me not, I think I missed the boat with Frozen. I think I'm at that age where I didn't fall into the let it go, the whole, like, I just kind of missed it. My kids were too old to see it, so I wasn't. So talk to me about what about Frozen has spurred this like mania.
Well, I think the key to Frozen is that it is the first Disney animated movie that has two strong female leads and the whole theme of this show is the love of each other as sisters.
Yeah.
And, you know, and most Disney movies, if there's a female heroine, there is a handsome prince who has to save her. Mm-hmm. And so this is the archetype that has been broken by Frozen. And it was a huge risk, I think, for Disney. And I think the reason they took the risk was because of the popularity of the musical Wicked, that has two strong female characters. And I do think it was a gamble for them, but the gamble paid off, obviously, because it was like Frozen mania. Like our very first preview, we had 35 princesses, Elsa's and Anna's.
Head to toe dressed, like very seriously, walking down the steps, show me this show.
And just
very serious,
dragging their parents into the theater.
Yeah.
So, which is, I mean, how great is that? To have kids excited about going to theater. And so I think that Frozen set the way. If there wasn't Frozen, we wouldn't have Encanto. We wouldn't have these female-driven animated movies now, because, you know, for Disney, they're like, oh, hey, we found a new revenue source, so let's keep doing it. Yeah. But I think it's also an important message as well, of the power of women and the power of familial love as well. So I hope you see that tonight when you see the show.
You do. I mean, I have to say, you totally sold me on Frozen. You can ask some of the staff members. It just, you know, like I said, it just. And I sat here and watched this show, and first of all, the two actresses playing Elsa and Anna are extraordinary, and their chemistry together is phenomenal.
And their singing voices are crazy, out of this world amazing. Yeah.
Yes. And did Gabby, who plays Elsa, and Alex, who plays Anna, did they bond during this process?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So just a little spoiler alert. So we had cast the show back in March, and we had cast this actress to play Elsa. And then 2 months before we started rehearsal, she pulled out because she got another gig. And so we were scrambling. We had no idea what to do, because it's a very hard role to cast, because it's a very hard role to sing. And so I texted an agent friend of mine. I said, hey, we lost our Elsa. Do you have anybody? And he sent me this tape. He's like, we just signed this woman. She just graduated from college. So, like, you know, she's just starting her career. And I saw the tape and I was like, oh my goodness, I think this is our Elsa. And we cast her. Yeah.
And they're beautiful together.
They're fantastic together. And
voices. Oh, anyway, I only say that, I sidebar, but I say that because I totally fell in love with the story, you know, and their sibling, you know, conflict coming together, and it's just, and the music is
iconic. The music
Yeah.
is iconic. And so for me, I'm excited about families coming to see this, parents and grandparents bringing their children and their grandchildren to come see this, because it is generational. So you're both introducing this younger generation to the form of theater, of live theater, which is so different. And so our version of Frozen, I think you'll see it and go, oh, this kind of reminds me, like, I remember the movie and I remember these events, but it's in a slightly different way. But I'm still laughing.
Yeah.
I'm still enjoying these beautiful songs. So
does not dumb it down.
does not dumb it down. Yeah. Again, my very first rehearsal, I was like, we're going for truth.
Yep.
Play this like realism, and then we'll enhance from there. And so it's pretty powerful.
Well, I hope you all are excited. I'd love to have, if you have any questions for Alan or for me or yes.
Alan, you've obviously done a lot of work on both sides of the spectrum with live and theater and the like, but then also with television, where you don't have the live reaction. Which do you find more rewarding?
Did you all hear that?
He asked, I've done both live theater and I've done TV. Which one do I find more rewarding? I mean, live theater is, of course, wins hands down, just because you get that immediate reaction from the audience, and you can try something. Like last night, our Olaf was like, I'm not getting a laugh on this. Let me try something different tonight. And he got the laugh last night. And this is a show that is, because of the fact that it's geared for kids, there's a layer of comedy, and there's a layer of stuff, a lot of physical comedy for the kids, but there's also smarter humor for the adults as well. So,
which is, Disney does that really well.
Disney does that really well.
They did that with Beauty and the Beast. They've done that,
And that goes to my origin story. I was a latchkey kid in the San Fernando Valley, and both my parents worked. So in the afternoons, I would watch TV, and ultimately I would watch Sesame Street, or I'd watch Warner Brothers cartoons. And so I kind of learned my sense of comedy from, those beautiful Warner Brothers cartoons by Tex Avery and Fritz Freeling and Chuck Jones. Which were always played at two levels. And Sesame does as well. They played at a kid's level on one, but the content was so smartly done that if an adult watched with a kid, they would be laughing as well, because they would. If you have not seen What's Opera Doc, which is a Looney Tunes thing where they parody famous operas with Elmer Fudd and Bugs Bunny.
So good.
But it all takes classical music and rewrites it for the vernacular of these Warner Brothers characters. It is brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. And Sesame does that as well. Sesame has a great sort of layer of humor with, of people making fun of themselves.
That's where I learned first heard, what is it, Flight of the Bumblebee? That's where I first heard that, was Looney Tunes.
Looney Tunes, yes.
Other questions? Thoughts? Yeah.
Great.
Another?
Yeah,
go ahead.
Do it.
And then how about the gentleman behind first, and then you? Go ahead.
What high school were you in?
So I went to a place called James Monroe High School, which was in the San Fernando Valley, a little town called Granada Hills. And so I was a Valley boy growing up, long hair, puka shells. This was back in the late 70s, early 80s. A lot of Hawaiian shirts. Yeah.
We were joking because we were in LA at the same time.
Yeah.
One of my pivotal experiences as a young person, I was 12, was for my birthday, my mom took me to see A Chorus Line at the Schubert Theater. And I loved it so much. I made her take me again in the evening. And it's, I wore out the album. It made me interested in being an artist. And
then she sent me this questionnaire of things for this interview. And she was like, how did you, what was the first thing you saw? And I was like, oh, I saw a chorus line at the Schubert Theater. And I fell in love with theater. And so we both bonded over that. We had the shared experience.
Yeah. No, yeah.
There's quite a bit of high school musical theater around this area also, but I've never heard of the kids directing any of the high school musicals. Was that typical when you grew up in California?
I'm sorry, the
kids directing.
Directed the show in your high school play?
Oh, yes. So,
That's not typical around here.
a lot of at least when I was growing up, we did play production, and then you did everything. You acted, you sometimes wrote. Like I remember in junior high school, I had this book, like Saturday Night Live had just come out. And so they had this book of some of the sketches in their show. And so I was like, I'm gonna create an hour of Saturday Night Live here, for the kids. And so we did the Coneheads, we did Weekend Update, and so again, like we're doing probably material that was slightly too mature for our age range, but they let us do it, and it was a ball. So even back then, we were creating our own stuff, and that's kind of how it all happens. Like that's when passion happens, when you get to do all of the things. You have to do all of the things and create.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that's where you start learning what avenue of the arts you're going to go down, right? It's like, oh, I don't know if I really should be in front, like an actor. Maybe I'm better as a stage manager, or maybe that's where you can kind of explore the different aspects as well.
And for me, the power of getting your first laugh on something is intoxicating, and you want more of it. And I can see with our little adult cast, our young Elsas and our young Annas.
They're not going to stop.
No, they're Elise, just one of our Annas, like when she got her first laugh, I was like, okay, yeah. She is committed for life now. Yeah.
Yeah. What was the casting process like, and would you have any pointers for younger people looking for?
Oh, that's a great
question. That's a great question.
Did you all hear that?
What was the casting process like for Frozen? I have to tell you, so this is my third show here, and the talent in the DC area is so strong because there's so many theaters out here. We only cast 2 people from out of town. Yeah, our Olaf, who an actor named Kennedy Kanagawa, who I don't know if any of you saw the Into the Woods revival, but he's kind of stole the show as Milky White, a character that does not talk throughout the whole show, and he stole it. It was a puppet.
He is Olaf.
So he is Olaf and embodies Olaf. But why I am so thrilled that Kennedy is a part of our production, I cast him in a production of a show called Falsetto Land in New York when he was 12. And it started basically it was his first audition in New York. He grew up in Japan and came here and knew he wanted to perform. And he was so good, we cast him. And then that started his trajectory. He then went to college as a theater major and started working professionally in the industry. And here we are back again together, and it's great. So your question of any pointers, my pointer is you have to really love it to do this, because it's not an easy life. Especially now, because people are so well trained. Back in my day, you could just be a singer, you could just be a dancer, you could just be an actor, and you could find jobs in a career. Now everybody has to do everything. So if there is, my advice is, if there's one thing that you don't excel at, just get proficient in it. You know, if you aren't a good mover, go take a couple of dance classes and just get familiar with the terminology, get familiar with just the basic steps. And then the other thing that I would always say is be kind, be nice to everybody, because you have no idea who's gonna be that person who's giving you your next job. Like for this show, the Elsa, we didn't know her. She was just out of college. So we went to professors at her college. We went to people, she was doing summer stock, and Jason Lowith knew the artist director of that theater. We reached out and we found out, oh, she's fantastic. You're gonna love her. And we would have had second thoughts if we had heard otherwise. So it's always, you know, you have to remember that your behavior and your work ethic follow you throughout your career. I went to school with a gentleman named Casey Nicolau, who is probably one of the best choreographer and directors in New York. And he still calls me and said, hey, I'm casting the tour of Book of Mormon. These people have you on their resume. What do you think of them? So again, we all talk to each other.
Yeah, I will also just add really quickly, try your hardest not to take it personally if you don't get cast. And I say this because I've been in so many casting rooms, and most of the time it doesn't have to do with talent. It has to do with, well, we already have this voice and this person, and we need an alto or whatever here in this one, or we're looking for this kind and that, you know, it's so, I think the earlier you can learn how to take care of yourself as a performer, the better off you're going to be, the better auditions you're going to give, and the longer you'll be able to stay within the industry.
That's a great answer. Yeah, that's great.
Other thoughts, questions? No? I want one.
Okay.
How did they get the name Sesame Street?
That's a really good question. Well, because they knew they wanted it to be a neighborhood, right? I have to Google that because I don't actually know the answer to that.
I was just
That
curious.
is so funny.
I was just curious.
But it does sound like, you know, it sounds like a place you want to go to.
It does.
Yeah. Well, and Sesame Street, when it first aired, was geared. It was supposed to be sort of a urban New York setting. Because that's the demographic that we were trying to reach, because we wanted everyone to feel welcome, and so that Sesame was, you know, definitely one of the first shows that used diversity as a norm in their process.
That's right, and a very urban environment.
And
like
in
you
a
said.
very
Yeah,
urban environment.
Interesting. Shruti.
I was going to help you. I Googled it for you.
Oh, what's it say?
It says Sesame Street was almost named 123 Avenue B, but so during the pitch reel they shared, and it was like Sesame, Open Sesame, and then a street where neat stuff happened. So the Open Sesame kind of Sesame stuff. That's how the name happened.
Oh, that's beautiful.
See, I learned something new today about my own show.
Shruti.
Thank you, Shruti.
This gentleman, yeah.
Two questions. What's next for you? And is there something that you haven't done as an actor or a director that you would like to do in the future?
Oh, that's good.
That's great. So what's coming up next for me is, as a cast member of Sesame Street, we have a float in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. And I put together the performance on that float. And so that's when I go home, I have a couple weeks off, and then we put that all together to get ready for Thanksgiving Day. And it's my favorite day of the year, because you know,
It's the
It's-
parade.
it's the parade. It's thousands and thousands and thousands of people, and you just go down, you go down 6th Avenue, and
How long
it's,
have you been doing that for?
so this is I've been on the show for 26 years. I do it every year, and it's my favorite day of the year.
Look how happy you look even thinking about
It's great. It is
That's
really
awesome.
great. Like people are screaming your name,
Yeah.
as you go down, and you're like, how do you know who I am? But yeah, so it's amazing. And then directing wise, there's always stuff that I want to tackle. I love comedies, so like Noises Off, I would love to do. I directed Clue at Dallas Theater Center a couple years ago, and I'm trying to get Olney Theater to do it because it's
I didn't know that.
yeah, it's
Oh.
great. It's a great, very fun 90-minute show. And then musical wise, boy, I can't think of anything off the top of my head that I'm like, oh, I want to do that one. But there's always and so Jason always calls me with the most interesting projects. So to do South Pacific was a joy. I never thought I would be able to direct a Rodgers and Hammerstein classical piece. And Once on This Island was probably one of the most beautiful shows that I've ever directed, and I'm so proud of it. And so yeah, he always hands me these little gifts, and so I hope you enjoy Frozen as much as I've enjoyed putting it together.
Thank you. Yes.
You mentioned some of the process for casting. What about for some of the other roles that aren't stage roles? Stage manager, scenic designer, lighting designer. How do you go about choosing those roles?
That actually
that's
is a great
great
question.
question.
It's a great question.
Did you all hear that? How does Alan choose his creative team to create, like the set, we have sets, lights, costumes,
And
choreographer?
yeah, and it's kind of a combination of I talked to Jason. He has a list of people, I have a list of people, and then we see if there's anyone in common. So for instance, Paige Hathaway, who did our set design, did my set design for South Pacific in 2018. So that was an easy go. Patrick Lord, who you're gonna freak out at the beautiful projections we have for this show tonight. He and I worked together at the Vanguard's art thing last year, and we met and we were both like, oh, we kind of get each other. Our lighting designer, this is her first show at Olney, but I've worked with her 2 other times. One doing Clue at Dallas Theater Center and Elf at Pioneer Theater in Utah. And I think she's great. And so I introduced her to Jason and the team, and they were like, yeah, that's the person. And as far as the choreographer, Jason threw out a couple of local names. And Kelly Dambois, I looked at both of their websites, I saw their resumes, and Kelly was the one who I was like, oh, this seems interesting. We had a conversation, and we were like, let's try it. It's like a blind date. You just don't know if there's going to be a true connection or not. And the very first week of rehearsals when we were together, we both were like, okay, I know how you work and you know how I work. So we ultimately kind of worked tag team. So we both, so Kelly would be like, okay, yeah, that acting beat's not good. I was like, okay, thank you, Kelly. And I was like, yeah, can we move this person over here to do this step? And so we started to do each other's jobs, and it became sort of seamless. And
that's rare. I mean, that's
yeah, it is.
That doesn't always happen. And so that's why a lot of artists work with the same artists over and over again, because there's a common and a shared language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was a combination of people who have worked on staff here. Christopher Ustra, our musical director, he is Olney Theater Music Department.
Yes.
And so, but this is the first time that I've actually worked with him as a musical director. And we have a shorthand with each other because we've known each other for 3 shows. So we know how to joke with each other. We know, we know when we need to be, calm and sensitive.
Time out.
Calm and sensitive with each other. Yeah.
This gentleman, and then you, go ahead.
Just curious if you could talk a little on what the annual schedule is for Sesame Street in terms of,
That's a great question, because when I started on the show, we were filming 60 episodes a year, and it took 6 months to film that. And now with budget cuts, and now that there's so much more content for children out there, we now do 26 shows a season, which is filmed within a 4-month period. And so what that allows me to do, it allows me to come to Olney and direct, because I have the rest of the year basically free. During the budget cuts, the producers like, we're going to go to 25 shows, and the writer said, okay, which letter of the alphabet do you want me to cut? And so that's why we do 26 episodes a season now.
That is really great. I remember when that whole thing went public about the cuts for we thought we were going to lose Sesame Street for a little bit. I can't even, I grew up on Sesame Street. My kids grew up on Sesame Street. I actually can't imagine a world without Sesame Street. Like, that just seems like, why would you get rid of that?
Yeah. And we are very now reliant on partnerships with other streaming platforms. We have been with HBO for the last 8 years, and now that deal is coming to an end. So we are now shopping the show around to find another producing partner, because Sesame is a very expensive show to put together and produce. So. And
this goes back to what we're talking about, how important the arts are. I just have to bring it back to that, because we lose that. We lose everything that you and I just spent the last half hour talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and then I also want to say that, being on HBO Max, everyone thought, oh, they're leaving PBS. That is not the case. We're still on PBS. So we're actually on 2 different platforms, but PBS just gets the content a little later. So people who don't have access to cable, to streaming platforms, still have access to our show.
Yeah.
The costumes for the show are so iconic. How did you make it your own, and what was that process like?
That's a great question.
Yeah. So it's about the costumes. The costumes are so iconic. I'm assuming you mean iconic from the film, or they're so recognizable. How did you take that into your costumes?
So Kendra Ray, I believe is her last name, our costume designer. She has 2 kids, and she has 2 daughters, and so she took it upon herself to say, I am making the Elsa Let It Go outfit. And so you will see it and you will go, oh, I recognize that form, but she also then made it her own as well. And so I think you'll see that throughout the entire show, that there are nods to the movie, and kind of in my direction as well, there are nods to the movie, but we do it in a new way.
Yeah, I would also say, I remember there were some conversations where you were very much like, I don't want to go too far from the Disney, because it's so iconic in this moment still. It's still fresh, it's still new. There's Frozen 2. But I also want to make it my own.
Absolutely.
Right.
And the one I'm most proud of is our hidden people in the liminal world that's in the second act, where in the movie we're the boulder trolls, for lack of a better word. We wanted to keep the fun of those people, of that world, but with the idea of, well, we can't do boulders. Boulders aren't very pleasing to look at. So I'm very excited to see what for you to see what our costume designer came up with, because I find it just delightful. Yeah, and yeah.
Could you speak to how long it takes to sort of plan something this massive?
That's a great question.
A year.
Yeah, a year. Honestly, a year. You started way before I did, but I got involved in the casting process last March. So we had our cast last March. And like I said, a lot of things happened. We had a couple people drop out within that time. But the design meetings started probably last January, February. We just start talking about, what we think it could be. And then we would have production meetings, Zoom production meetings with all of our entire creative team every couple of months, just to see where everybody was in the process. And then at a certain point, there's a deadline for blueprints, there's a deadline for costume designs, that then Olney has to start their journey with creating this so it's ready in time for the show. And so, yeah, it is at least a year process, all told. But yeah, it's crazy. And then things change.
Yeah.
At the last minute. So yeah, it's like for the props, especially, we gave them a layer of ideas. And then once you're in the rehearsal room with the actual actors, with actual props, things just change.
Yeah.
Or like, oh, I think this would be really funny if we had this. And so.
And the puppets too are a whole other thing, because
Yeah.
you need to rehearse with something, but you can't make 2 puppets in time for the rehearsal.
Right.
So there's, yeah.
So I think, so to answer your question, probably the character that is most like the movie is Olaf. You're gonna see that form and go, I know exactly who that is. And we've taken slight liberties with the other puppet character, Stan. That is different than what they did on Broadway and different than the movie.
Is there another question? Yeah.
I was just curious, as someone who's worked around the country, and because it is such a long lead time, how easy or difficult is it to get people to commit coming to the Olney Theater Center that far in advance?
That's a great question. Because everyone is local, most of our, 90% of our cast is local, they then can plan their year around, okay, I have these 3 months that I have this job. And for Olney, this is, I think, one of the longest runs I've ever had of a show, because we know it should be popular and should sell very well. And so it's kind of our Christmas show this season.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, so that is, that then helps fill out the year for the local actors to be able to say, I'm booked for this amount of time. And so I'm committing that.
Right.
This is a competitive time of year though, right?
It is.
In the theater?
Yeah. I mean, but it's Frozen. I mean.
Well, and it's a long run. So you're like, oh, I have 4 months of work. It's a good gig.
It's a good gig.
And
it's
yes.
Frozen, you guys.
And it's this is from Hallie, who's like, Frozen? Why are we doing Frozen?
But it's all, but I say that joking, but I also mean it, like those 2 female roles are, they don't come around that often, yeah, so that's a big deal.
And for Alex DeBarge, our Anna, she's been doing stuff around town, and her stars slowly rising.
Oh, yeah.
I think this is going to solidify it for the DC audiences, that she is now a bankable person who can carry a show. So I'm so excited for that.
Some of you might remember her. She was in our Kiki Boots. What was the character? Shruti, do you remember the character's name that she played? No? Anybody? Jason, hiding back there.
I don't remember.
Oh my God! The director doesn't remember her name.
And
she sparkled in it. Yeah. I mean, she was the one who fell in love with Charlie, right? Okay, thank you, yes. But yeah,
Yeah, so very excited about that.
anything else before we wrap up? Yes.
A question about your role as director.
Yeah.
So you've gotten it to this point, to opening night. So what is your role with the play from now?
I get kicked out tomorrow morning. And no, so my role ends basically tonight. And the stage manager then takes the show over, and the stage manager maintains the show for the run.
And Alan will continue to get, we send out reports to everybody, so he'll continue to get updates on things that are happening, you know.
And this is such a long run. Chances are I'll be back just to come and see it one or two more times, and then probably give notes from that. But the stage manager then also, we obviously it's a long run, so we have a series of understudies that are then now have to be rehearsed just in case something happens, somebody gets sick, for them to fill in. And so that process now starts probably this week, right?
Yep, we keep on.
They keep on, yeah.
Keep on.
So we're always ready for any situation.
Well, almost.
I think she said that because our very first day in the theater for tech, where literally the mic was, our stage manager grabbed the mic and the power went out in the entire theater and the entire building. And so we lost our first day of tech because of a power outage.
Okay, it was because of a bird.
Oh, it was a bird. Yeah, we found out it was a bird.
Yeah.
The next day.
Yeah.
But this is a very hard show to do in a limited time frame. So we all kind of were like, okay, we scrambled a little bit, but we got it done. So.
And it's, Alan, the show is beautiful.
Thank you.
It really
Thanks.
is beautiful. It sparkles, and it's filled with surprises, and it's got such a lovely heart, and it's just beautiful. Let's give a round of applause to Alan.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming out today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. I hope you enjoyed the show.